Hello again everyone, Deflect here, Firm but Fair Gaming. Want to bring you a video. We're going to do another build video, and this time it's going to be on the Jedi Shadow, and this will be the tank spec. So, tanking Jedi Shadow, and it is the combat style Kinetic Combat. I'll get into all the different buttons and why I picked the different ones on each level. I'll get into the gear as well, but if you haven't done so, don't forget to hit that like button, share, subscribe, and let's jump into this build video. It is going to be for PVE content. This is not a PVE or PvP, build video. This is PVE only. And there's a couple different things I do, I guess, and some people, it all really depends on how you prefer to run it and what you prefer to do defensively and basically, I don't know, the way you're playing, essentially, as it comes down to. So the big thing about tanks is you want to take a lot of damage. How do you do that? With your shield and your absorb. Also by having a lot of health. You have a lot of endurance. 20,000 endurance gives me 394,000 health. So fairly good for health. But I dumped a lot more into shield because I wanted a higher shield chance than absorption. So the shield is basically if you are going to block anything, and the absorption is when you block something, how much of it you block. So they kind of work hand in hand, and I went a little heavier on shield just because I wanted a higher chance to block something. So my stats right now were 5,209 and 2,482 for absorption. So I almost doubled up, or just over doubled up the absorption. So that's the way I prefer to run it. That's what I like. You can run it the other way. You can go 50-50 if you prefer, and run basically the same shield and absorption. So that comes down to mainly personal preference and just which way you like to do it. So as a tank, that is your goal, to take damage. So big thing I took was the force resistance. Elemental internal kinetic energy damage reduction is increased by 3%. A flat 3% is always nice. And I went with force potency. Yes, it is a offensive one as well, but I will show you why I took it for the defense. That'll come later in the abilities and what they do. Now, as for the ones I selected, I went very particular on the ones I use just for the content I play mainly. So there is different choices. You can do whichever one you prefer. I went with Chain Cascade. Cascade debris pummels nearby enemies each time it deals damage. It's just good for AoE. So also, if you're doing a lot of flashpoints, it's really good for that. If you're not doing a lot of flashpoints, then you can take the increased damage, crit chance, and threat generation by cascading debris by 10%. More of your single target one. So feel free to pick that one if you like. On the next row, I use Energize Project. Project critical hit damage is increased by 50%, and damage for projects extends the duration of mind control by 3 seconds to targets already affected by your mind control. It's just what I picked. There wasn't really anything amazing. It's a little bit extra DPS, but nothing crazy. Going on to the next row, this was bugged for a long time in flashpoints. I haven't tested it out because I'm making this video just after 7.0.2 came out, so I haven't had a chance to test this and see if they fix it in this patch. But this was broken and not working very well. But each time you consume a charge of Kinetic Ward, the cooldown of Force Cloak is reduced by 2 seconds. If Kinetic Ward is broken by damage, it reduces the accuracy of all nearby enemies by 20% for 6 seconds. So it was really good because, your Force Cloak is a huge mitigation and defensive ability. You can mitigate a ton of high damage incoming with it. So that's why I took it. I still take it in hopes it was fixed, but I haven't had a chance, like I said, to test it out. If it is still broken, your next go-to will be Twilight Ward. Each time you consume a charge of Kinetic Ward, the cooldown of Force Potency is decreased by 2 seconds. If kinetic ward is broken, it grants 1 charge of force potency to you, which is really good. So if your kinetic ward breaks due to damage, you'll have force potency, and activating force potency grants 30% shield absorption for 20 seconds. So very good, very, very good. That is the main reason why force potency. I took the other ability. If you remember in the gear, that's why I took the force potency is reduced by 15 seconds. So it brings it down a little, about 15 seconds. Like it does help in the long run. Next, I chose battle readiness. Ready yourself, immediately restoring 15% of your max health, increasing all damage of all techniques, increasing trigger effects of 25%. And that's why I took it. The next one I went on was I used reduce the cooldown of Force Cloak, because Force Cloak is just amazing to have. Kinetic Surge is what I took. Yeah, it's okay. Increase the movement speed by 15% and your effective stealth by 10%. Movement speed is always great. That's why I take it. Increase your movement. A couple of abilities increase your movement speed by 50%. So it was nice to have. I took this for AoE because I do a lot more AoE content than single target raiding bosses. So Cleaving Cut is just like a defensive for AoE. Basically, striking targets in a cone, they got to be in front of you. Slowing their movement speed by 50% and applies Kinetic Veil for 3 seconds. It increases your damage reduction by 5% for each target hit. So if you're hitting a lot of people in front of you with it, it is a great defensive to have. And it's only on a 10-second cooldown, so it's very short as well. And this is another big reason for the assassin, or sorry, not the assassin, the shadow tank. This is the Force Cloak, grants 2 seconds of resilience. Great ability. As you know, resilience is purge all hostile removable effects and increases your chance to resist force and tech attacks by 200% for 3 seconds. So very big defensive if you know high damage is incoming. That is the whole point of the shadow tank. Now, getting into some of the buttons you will need to know on this. Basically, slow time, you want to use this every time it's on CD or off CD. You want to put this immediately back on CD. It is one of your biggest abilities, if not the single most biggest ability. It is slows the passage of time for up to 8 targets, dealing X amount of damage, slowing their movement speed by 30% for 10 seconds, and weakening all affected targets for 45 seconds. Weakened targets deal 5% less melee and range damage. Does not damage, sleep, or incapacitate enemies. And it generates a high amount of threat as well. So it's a big threat gen, and it reduces all their damage by 5%. Very good ability. It also applies 1 stack of Harness Shadows. When you have Harness Shadows and you cast Cascading Debris, it cannot be interrupted, and the damage is increased heavier on Cascading Debris. There are 2 things that can apply this. Slow time, project. So if you had a stack of this, eventually when you get to 3 stacks, it will start glowing, and that is when you want to use it. Now it is fully charged with 3 stacks. This is when you want to use Cascading Debris. And remember, when you have 3 stacks, you start casting, this can't be interrupted. You can't be stunned, you can't do anything. It is a very, very powerful ability when it's at 3 stacks. A couple of the other ones you will want to make note of. Remember the Cleaving Cut. It adds the damage reduction to the enemies, but they have to be in front of you. So remember, stack them all in front of you before using this. Force Potency is also great to use. This is off the GCD, so you can use this anytime. It does grant an ability benefit to other ones, but the biggest thing is it also grants 30% shield absorption for 20 seconds. Very, very big. Very big. And then you can use another ability with it, which will buff the other ability, but that is huge. A couple of your other defensive abilities that you will need to keep track of is your Kinetic Ward, and don't use this on cooldown. So Kinetic Ward will have a shorter cooldown than what it is. 15 charges that will increase your shield chance by 18% for 20 seconds. Each time successful shield kinetic charge loses 1 charge, but it doesn't need to be fresh. You want to refresh this when it's as low as you can before it expires. You always want to have it up, but you want to refresh it only at the end. Another huge one is Resilience. That is just a big defensive ability like we discussed. Your Deflection, increase your range and melee defense by 50% for 12 seconds. Another great defensive ability. And the other one we took was Battle Readiness. So this is another great defensive ability. Now, when you're playing Assassin Tank or Shadow Tank, either or, you will want to remember a couple things, and that is Force Cloak is a great damage mitigator because you can cloak out of a lot of the damage, but you need to have a taunt afterwards because you will lose all aggro. So if you are, if a boss is attacking you and he's about to do a big ability and you Force Cloak and the ability stops channeling or stops casting on you, you then need to immediately taunt the boss back. That is the big thing. So you got to come out and you got to taunt right back. You can taunt, you can slow time. That should get you enough aggro with slow time or taunt. Mass mind control if you need more than one target. But definitely remember, when you're mitigating the damage and you pop out, you will have to use a taunt afterwards. That you just have to, because you will not have aggro anymore. And DPS don't like when you don't have aggro or healers. I am a biochem person, so I do have both the biochems. Increase your endurance and defense for 480 minutes. Great to have active. Also, I use the shield one. Absorb 30% of the damage up to 84 and change thousand for 15 seconds. Damage absorbed scales with level. So it's a good one to have. It's just an extra defensive for 15 seconds if you need it. And it is on, the cooldown sucks. It's a 3-minute cooldown, but it's an extra one to have regardless. So, as for doing DPS, you still should try and do damage because damage does equal threat. But, it's not your highest priority. Your highest priority is to stay alive. I also do have the med pack as well. So, as you can see, this one goes on cooldown. You still have this one, so you can alternate. They do not work. Another benefit of a Shadow and Assassin Tank is these won't reset, or they never used to, unless you got out of combat. But because you can cloak, you are out of combat, and then they will actually reset and come back up, and you can use them. So double bonus there as the Shadow and Assassin. But basically, when you want to start, you'll force pull someone into you, force pull, and then you'll either project, slow time. If you don't have aggro on something, then use your taunt, but you'll want to do those first to grab as much aggro as you can. If you are AoEing, don't forget you do have Whirling Blow to get some targets on the AoE. Project to get your 3 stacks, and then you are able to cascading debris, and you are able to move while casting it, so you don't have to stand still. And basically remember to slow time on cooldown. That is a great defensive. It's a great way to weaken the enemies, and it gives you a lot of threat. So on cooldown, use slow time. It's going to be your most ability. Force Breach is another good one. Strikes 8 enemies when you're doing damage. Internal generates a high amount of threat, so this is another great threat generator when you have AoE situations. And your double strike is just a double hit on the target, which is good to do. It does reduce the healing received from all sources by 20%. So if you're fighting someone who can heal, this is a great ability to use, so they get the healing reduced on them. Other than that, it's just working your defensives, knowing when the big damage is coming, knowing when the damage, little damage is coming, knowing what defensives you need to have up. If you have kinetic ward up and you're going to take a huge shot, you might have to hit resilience. Resilience is nice because it is on a 1 minute CD, so it is short cooldown, whereas deflection is on a 2 minute CD. So remember, this is your long cooldown, short resilience, but it only lasts for 3 seconds. Not much else to it. Don't forget to interrupt. Force potency, another great defensive. You can see crit hit chances increase, so if you have other abilities up, that would actually work really well if you had the Cascading Debris one up and you force potency Cascading Debris, or you force potency project. Either I do. It just works well. It's just a little bit extra damage. It's nothing crazy, but everything helps, right? Anyways, that's kind of the gist of it. It really is just rotating your defensives, and then mainly AoE, you'll slow time and force breach are your main abilities when you're AoEing with your project to create stacks, and then with stacks, Cascading Debris. It's pretty much that simple. Stay alive. It's your main goal. You do have other, utility ones like Force Slow, but it doesn't come into play as much as you would think. For me, anyway. For someone else, it might, but not for me. And Guard. When activating, guarded players take 5% less damage and generate 25% less threat. A DPS, a healer, whoever's taking, getting a lot of threat from you, just throw the guard on them. And that way they won't pull threat as much. That really wraps up the Shadow Tank. If you have any questions on it, leave a comment below. Like, share, subscribe. This was Deflect, Firm But Fair Gaming. We'll see you in the next video.